All right, welcome to Against All Odds. Happy 4th of July, everyone. We have one member of the degenerate trifecta. Harry is on board. The brothers are off trying to blow off their thumbs like with M80s. I think it's a family tradition. But Harry is a big fan of our next guest, and how can you not be? He's a former standout goaltender turned Vegas odds maker who most notably was the runner-up to me on Fox Bet Live Season 3. The odds of him insulting Harry at some point during this interview are minus 1,200. Vegas Shark, co-founder of the Bet the Board podcast. My good pal, Todd Fuhrman, is here. What's happening, Fuhrman?
Not much. I applaud you guys for working on the holiday. The rest of the degenerate trifecta decides to take a couple of days off. So we know you guys are the linchpin holding the whole organization together. And more importantly, Sal, the homage atop your head to what was a greater sports betting past with Lock It In. I just hope Fox doesn't come after you and decide to charge royalties for that heirloom atop your dome.
You're right. Yeah, I wonder how much this is worth. I think I know the answer. If Lock It In was a show you and I worked on, it was 2 years with Lock It In. Then they changed the title to Fox Bet Live, and it all kind of went a little bit downhill. I don't want to say it.
There we go.
Yeah. So,
Harry, we can honestly say the show started to go downhill once Sal won. Then it all completely cratered.
Come on.
It was great season one.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Sal didn't mention that you were season 1 champ.
Yeah, he conveniently left that out. And I'm still convinced to this day, Harry, that Sal was the one that pushed me out. Once he won season 3, he picked up the phone. He called the rest of the folks at Fox and goes, you know what? We don't need that stupid Fuhrman back with a chance to regain his glory. And then Sal, why don't you share with all listeners how well you did in season 4?
Well, first of all, why would I push you out? Why would I push you out? You were my easiest competition. I would need you around there. That's ridiculous. That's like saying.
There we go.
I do miss Todd. In all funniness, I love the show and I do miss it a ton.
All funniness. I miss Fuhrman a lot.
The clay stuff.
We joke around about this, but those are the aggressive. And I will say it's also. I would get crazy on Sunday afternoon. I'd have to turn on NASCAR. It would be me. It'd be Fuhrman. It'd be Clay. We'd compete against each other every week. And it would almost always come down to Sunday afternoon, some NASCAR event that Fuhrman bet. And I hate watching NASCAR, but I'd have to turn it on because I'd have a gut-wrenching feeling inside. A lot of the week would hinge on whether or not Fuhrman won his NASCAR prop, and it drove me crazy. And I'm in both ways. I'm glad, and I really miss the competition because it really it was the best for me. I mean, I've had $10,000, a lot of money on games, and it didn't size up to what we had. Yeah,
I think you picked NASCAR on purpose, Todd, just to mess with Sal.
Oh, that was part of it. There was no doubt about it. But to Sal's point, the 3 years we spent going back and forth, the relationships that were forged on air. And the reality of it was people went, do you guys actually get along off set? And I'm willing to bet that there are TV shows in the sports realm where there haven't been nearly as many text messages exchanged between the four of us.
Oh, yeah.
When we launched that show initially. Now, granted, there was plenty of vitriol that came maybe in the middle of season 2, given some non-sports related issues that may have manifested themselves.
Right.
But if anything, it brought us closer. And Sal, I have to take this opportunity, though, for a shameless plug, because NASCAR really came full circle. About 10 days ago, we launched a Bet the Board branded NASCAR podcast in conjunction with NASCAR. So they are officially in the Bet the Board business. Everybody now out there can go ahead and sweat NASCAR. And Harry, we'll feed you a couple winners since I know the 1 out of 10 that you pick, you're going to tag me in inevitably one way or another. So we'll get you to the winner's circle in a little auto action.
Hey, Todd, did you have Suarez the other day?
I wish I had Daniel Suarez. I mean, talk about a dominant race. A couple weeks ago at Sonoma. Great to see a lot more parity in the sport.
Suarez.
Yeah, Sal, you're out of the conversation. This is two adults talking about making left turns in NASCAR. So,
but I don't know what took so long. Of course, NASCAR should recognize you and Payne Insider. By the way, if you name your kid Payne Insider, they have to be a degenerate gambler, right? There was no chance for Payne to do anything but host a podcast with you. But good for you. That's great on the NASCAR thing. And I do want to say, today being July 4th, I did not bet the Nathan's, like NASCAR to me, even though it's heavily bet and it's a big sport, that's as fringe as I'll go nowadays because the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, I didn't bet it today, Fuhrman. I know you don't like these. You don't like these things. No.
I'm calling your bluff here. There is no chance that you don't have one bet or Joey Chestnut parlayed into 36 7 other baseball games today, figuring that was the leg that was going to get you an extra 7 cents. There's an over under on dogs consumed. Sal, you can lie to most people. You can lie to your wife, but don't come on your own show and lie to all your loyal listeners.
I think, I wouldn't do that, but I had a bad betting experience with the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. And I actually stuck to my guns. I said, I'm not betting this anymore. I don't know if you remember the story. In fact, we had Joey Chestnut on and we interviewed him on Fox Bet Live. He famously, I bet the under 72.5 hot dogs. He had 64.5 hot dogs consumed. The Carnival Barker announcer is interviewing him after the contest. I was like, oh, I won. This is easy. And he announces, he's like, no, you guys forgot a plate. There was an extra 10 in there. I actually ate 74.5. And they don't even check it. They're like, 74.5, 75, a new record. I was like, what? This is crazy. Where's the governing body? And this is the reason we could speak to this right now, why a lot of the books won't regulate this, right?
Yeah, I mean, anything that doesn't have a black and white scoreboard or something that can be identified in a box score, you're always going to open up that Pandora's box. And once you take the lid off, you really can't put it on there. And I think it's protections, not just for the sports book, but obviously for the bettors as well. When you're betting an event, whether it be baseball, whether it be badminton, lacrosse, you name it, you want to know when you've won your bet. And I think, that kind of situation that played out there is part of the reason that anything that has a level of ambiguity gets a little bit dicier. But honestly, guys, we've seen this in the NBA when there's official stat corrections. We don't know what a rebound is. We don't know what a block is. So I think any of the time you're talking about some of the secondary markets, over time, that stuff is going to balance it out. But as sports bettors, we only remember the ones that went against us more so than the ones that were fortuitous bounce for us.
So, I mean, you saw that, but you like to stay away from these things. Like back, it was like the Wild West season 1 of Lock It In. We could bet and we did bet. I remember betting $300 on Handmaid's Tale to win 100. And I thought it was such a lock and I lost. I mean, there have been so many of these. I think Clay bet Will Romo and Nance announced the age discrepancy.
I was going to say the roof be open too or something along those lines.
Yeah,
I mean, there were so many different things. Speaking of which, where's Lobo? Get Lobo into the fold. We need him to defend himself for what was or wasn't allowed during season 1 of Lock It In.
It really is something. It goes on and on. Now, I do want to pat myself on the back here. I think you're going to tell me this is a terrible bet, but the NBA Finals were atrocious from a viewing perspective. In my
entire playoffs,
I hate it. The playoffs. What would you say, Harry? 56% of the games were 10 points or more. Even the close games ended up blowouts, right? So I said, instead of watching this, because I have to watch it, I hate watching these blowouts. I'm going to take advantage. I was betting the -9.5 on both sides. Now, if you have a 3-point spread, the favorite is going to be about plus 190, plus 210. The underdog is going to be about plus 450. I did well on this. Do you recommend this strategy for people?
Long-term, absolutely not. But I think given the lack of parity we saw, I mean, being willing and able to take a flyer, if you feel a game is going to get out of control, it does make some sense. When you have to oftentimes go outside the box, and we've seen it, honestly, not turning the NBA into the NHL discussion, but we saw it in the NHL playoffs. A lot of games weren't decided by one goal like we'd grown accustomed to. So some of the sharpest bettors that I talk to that normally would shy away from reverse puck lines and those sort of things on underdogs were looking to try and fatten the odds working in their favor, obviously for much smaller bets than their normal positions. But I think, when you start to see some of these trends play out, you can capitalize if odds makers aren't adjusting enough. And by the way, Sal, I have to call it out. I was going to do my best to deadpan and try and keep a straight face with all this. Right. I thought Harry was going to have the most ridiculous backdrop being in the basement he is with a throwback to Casablanca and North African Moroccan blinds. Yeah. But what's going on the couch over your right shoulder? I'm trying to keep tabs on what's going on. Your own family member is so embarrassed by the show we're putting on. He or she has buried their head under the pillows on your couch in the office.
That's a dog, Fuhrman. That's not a family member. It's not really a family member.
I'm pretty sure Melissa would keep the dog and kick you to the curb faster than she's kicking the dog.
That's telling us we should take you
a family member
in the content, in the hot dog contest.
Sal's oblivious to the dog every podcast, always, whatever David's doing.
We usually bet the dog whenever the dog rolls in, whatever we're discussing, but we're just talking about. But I do want to seize on this a second. You said it's not a good long-term bet, the -9.5 both sides, but you're a math guy. Are blowouts here to stay in the NBA? I mean, it's all 3-point variance, right? we're typically seeing one team go 10 for 34, and then that team doesn't have a chance, and that team gets blown out. Did we find until they change the style of play that maybe this is the way to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think you raise an excellent point. I mean, talking about 3-point variance and how squirrely these games can get, or lopsided, I guess. You know, if a team gets hot from beyond the arc, for years in college basketball, the 3-point shot was considered the great equalizer. But now in the NBA, it's the great differentiator. I mean, if a team goes 3 of 17 from beyond the arc in the first half, they find themselves down by 20 and things snowball. Now, I'm not the biggest NBA bettor. I'm not a massive NBA fan. Well, I watch some of the biggest games, of course, because I love the star power as a part of it. But I think as you see more and more teams rely on the 3, and you see guys, you know, feeling comfortable to pull from 25 feet, we move the arc back once already. Maybe it's a legitimate conversation that has to be had with the NBA to open up the paint, create more space on the floor, move that 3-point line back again. And of course, purists out there will go, well, it's, you know, the integrity of records, this, that, and the other. I think you have to be fluid and adjust to the game. And these athletes are just getting too good from distance that if you want to try and emphasize, you know, paint play and get some more size involved, you have to do something to kind of space out that offensive end. So maybe if we're having this dialogue a couple of years from now, you know, that 3-point line has moved back 3 or 4 feet. And we're talking about a completely different game outside of the MTV Rock and Jock Peach Basket, which I don't think will get added for 40 points.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And by the way, we could work backwards. There's enough data out there. Just figure out how many 3-pointers you want attempted in a game. And then, you know, there's enough data like, okay, they won't take the shot from this far back, so move it back 6 inches or 8 inches. It does screw up the corner 3, though, right? I mean, there's almost no room there anyway. So what do? You just extend the top of the key 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some unique ways that they can try and go about it. And look, I won't have claimed to crunch all the numbers to know exactly where the proliferations come from. And to your point, you know that guys are going to work on the corner 3 if it's a shorter shot. But we see it in tennis. I mean, the net height is not the same in the middle of the net as it is if you're trying to hit passing shots along the baseline. So what's to say we couldn't have that in the NBA? Because it'll allow teams to defend a little bit differently. They'll be able to push players to the perimeter. And you can see guys getting a lot more open looks from the top of the key.
Yeah.
I think you have to be fluid as athletes get bigger, faster, and stronger than they've ever been in the past. You know, rules have to change. Football seems to be the only one that can withstand the test of time for whatever reason, as far as spatial dimensions and everything else is concerned.
Baseball, they move the fences back. Every ballpark is a different dimension anyway. Yeah, for sure. So, but I did want to ask it, like, back to the trend. So I had this -9.5 plus thing going, and it was like 11 of the last 14 Warriors games. 11 of the last 12 Celtics games it hits. I was flying high, but giving it out to someone, isn't it? Do you feel weird giving out a monstrous trend that wins? So the Lightning were 19-1 at home after a loss at some point, right? Do you feel weird giving it out? Because at that point, it's still 50-50. Can you speak to trends and how, yeah, you can get excited about it, but eventually the odds makers adjust, even though it doesn't seem like that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, betting markets are fluid, and over time, obviously, you're going to see these trends accounted for. And if we're staying on the NBA, not to, you know, make a necessarily an apples to oranges comparison, but it's a lot of what I used to bet blindly when you were talking about a team coming home in an NBA series facing an 0-2 deficit. You could bet them in the first quarter, in the first half, because those numbers were just hung as a derivative of the full game number. Now books are getting smarter. They understand the trend that's out there. And a team that may be a 1 or 1.5 point dog for the full game could be as much as a 2.5 or 3 point favorite in the first half to kind of price people out. And when you're talking about some of the trends, those secondary markets that don't get as much attention from bettors, you can capitalize on those a lot longer. And you've seen it in the NHL, like you were talking about, whether it's first period totals, whether it's yes, no, a goal in the first 10 minutes. I mean, there was a time earlier this year where the Devils weren't priced correctly for a goal in the first 10 minutes. And those numbers eventually ballooned out to $3 and $3.30 and some astronomical price tags. So for folks that were chasing the trend to the end, they were obviously eroding their bankrolls. And if you're Johnny come lately, that's not going to pay off. But to your point, I mean, a lot of these things, you know, are 50-50 propositions at minus $1.10. And if you're talking about an individual occurrence, you have to kind of put the previous 15 to 18 games, you know, to the sideline because it doesn't have any impact on what you're going to see the night of.
Yeah, I felt bad giving it out. I'm like, look, you could lose this and it would still be a big winner because you have to kind of be following it for the last 3 weeks. I want to talk about the state of sports gambling in my state and the country. By the way, what's going on with California? I feel like you went to Sacramento to testify a few years ago and pushed the sports gambling agenda. And it was right then where everything went to shit. and now they say it's supposed to be on the docket or whatever in November. And I don't know. I'm not excited about it when I hear like New Yorkers not being able to bet, player props for the NBA draft last week. So what are we to look at with California?
Yeah, I mean, clearly me going to Sacramento had a bigger negative impact on the state of gambling in California than that whole pandemic thing that set the entire country back for multiple years. So revisionist history at its finest, Harry. Let Sal throw me under the bus so the Californians won't welcome me with open arms. But California is in a unique spot. And it's similar to what we've seen kind of play out in Florida, where they had legalization at Hard Rock for about 7 minutes. Unfortunately, Calvin Ridley got sucked in for those 7 minutes and is paying the price for it. But California has some tribal compacts that they have to work through, and it's figuring out how to allow the tribes to keep their rights and have access to some of the regulated betting markets, whether it's with, some of the more traditional operators, FanDuel, et cetera, to kind of come in and run book. But will it be mobile? Will it just be retail over the counter? And I think until the state's able to work through that, even if it passed by overwhelming public sentiment as a ballot measure in November, that it's not going to be as simple as flipping a switch and allowing the floodgates to open. But you talked about New York, and I think New York is already running into a heap of problems as far as the tax rates and just how untenable it is for the operators to offer truly competitive products. And if you can't offer minus 110 on both sides for NFL games and most stick and ball sports, then the long-term viability of that isn't going to be sustainable. And we've seen that in some states where there's monopolies with lotteries and everything else. Suddenly the price tags juice out to minus 113, it's minus 115. And when that's the case, any of us that have bet offshore or have played with locals, we're not going to take all of our money and go, you know what, let's bet in the regulated market because we have consumer protections if we're getting an inferior product being dealt to us. So I think a lot of those states have to figure out how to protect the customers, how to create a competitive product and allow folks to bet the right way. But at the same time, I mean, the state of sports betting, what are we, 4 years, 5 years past PASPA? I'm not nearly as optimistic now as I was initially. I think that that first wave of momentum was great, but you're seeing a lot of sports states, with antiquated thought processes, with college bans, with draft props and a lot of different things. Whereas for me, I'd want it to open up the full betting menu. If it's good for one state, it's good for another. And if there's anything that goes on from an impropriety standpoint, then you take a look back and you kind of make some of those adjustments for your betting menus.
Yeah. So it seems like what you're saying is we are a long ways away from, they may legalize in Texas. And I think that's when the second wave comes because there's still some giant states out there who are not, it's not kosher in California, Texas, Florida, all these. So, but saying that it's legal in those states, you still can't bet in Michigan what you can bet in New Jersey, what you can't bet in New York. I don't think we'll all be on the same page for another decade, I think, in terms of, why does FanDuel, why can you bet this in New Jersey, but you can't bet, you can't bet the Heisman here. It's, is 10 years good? I want to know your 5-year plan overall, but first of all, when will we all be like, okay, great, we could all bet the same thing all the time in any state?
Yeah. I don't think that's coming anytime soon. And I think, honestly, 10 years is ambitious on that. I mean, if I was looking at a 5-year plan, I'd love the thought process, guys, to say that, hey, look, sports betting was legal in 45 states in some capacity. We know there are going to be some holdouts. I don't ever expect sports gambling to be legalized in Utah. There are some other states out there as well that's going to be much more difficult in terms of, barriers to entry. And even just a couple of weeks ago in North Carolina, we saw what was one of the more forward-facing sports betting bills that people thought was going to pass, without much resistance. You had a lot of, Bible beating that was going on about the potential pitfalls of sports betting and what it can do. So North Carolina is not going to have sports betting in 2022. And Ohio is another state where you have major professional franchises and arguably one of the biggest college football programs as well, that they still haven't been able to push through sports betting from a mobile standpoint, something people thought was a formality in 2022 because people come in with other biases and, they pervade the sports gambling discussion the same way they do a lot of the other political issues that our country's facing right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's two sides. So there's the Native American issue. That seems to be the biggest in California and Florida. And then there's the other one, like, gambling is bad for you kind of thing, right? So that, you're up against a lot of these things. I do want to say, like Darren Ravel will come up with something every week where $90 billion was made bet in New Jersey this month or something. And people are like, oh yeah, sports gambling. Wow, the DraftKings, the FanDuels, they must be making money hand over foot. But as you pointed out, these entities are getting taxed so heavily that the state's making money does not equal the books making money, for sure, right? So yeah, you talk 5 years from now, consolidation seems to be the answer. Is it DraftKings, FanDuel, Amazon, Fanatics, or even fewer? Do they consolidate even more tight than that?
Yeah, I mean, the path to profitability, to your point, Sally, is always tough because, I mean, they're essentially giving away the store now. I mean, we've seen it in every new state that comes online, the massive sign-up bonuses that are there, and the different promotions to try and attract people to brand. So I think what's fascinating, and you look at the way, Wall Street has kind of gone about evaluating some of these gambling stocks, they're changing their pitches, in their quarterly earnings meetings, and they're going, oh, well, we're profitable in X, Y, and Z states. Well, as a shareholder, I don't give a damn if you're profitable in 3 states and you're losing your ass in another 15.
Right.
I want to know when money is flowing through from top line handle to bottom line revenue. And I don't see a scenario playing out for some of the bigger operators, given the amount of money that they've been spending for at least a couple of years. So to your point, I think consolidation is inevitable. And if you were looking at the landscape, I mean, you mentioned FanDuel, part of the Flutter umbrella. DraftKings, they continue to grow and they're spending money. I have some skepticism. I mean, I know what their burn rate looked like in DFS when they were given a lifeline for, sports betting to try and reinstitute things, but they seem to have endless coffers in terms of raising more capital and taking advantage there. But I think the brick and mortars are well positioned as well, because your Caesars, your BetMGMs, they can absorb, some of the costs associated with sports gambling through physical entities. And, when you're talking about, balance sheets and how everything is siloed a little bit, once you start to get online casino, I think that's where all of these operators are going to find their windfall, because the margins for online casino far outweigh sports betting. And it's a significantly higher hold historically than, whatever we're talking about, the 5 to 7% that some of these operators are writing. And you mentioned Fanatics. I'm going to be interested to see what the Fanatics business model looks like. Some very smart people that have an established precedent and track record within the space, how they're able to go about operating and what their business strategy will be, knowing that they probably have a more extensive marketing base to work to than any of the existing operators. But I think the same could have been said about FanDuel and DraftKings having all those DFS customers, and they still spent a lot of money to try and bring in fresh faces.
It's weird you didn't mention Fox Bet. You went off about 2.5 minutes. And I heard casinos. I heard all of them. Yeah,
Sal, I got as much Fox Bet stock as you want. I can sell it to you for pennies on the dollar. You might be able to find it on the pink sheets if you're looking for penny stocks.
I'll look for it on the pink sheet. Hey, I asked you this question. Well, first of all, people ask me this question, and I hate answering it. And so what I'm going to do is ask you. What was rock bottom for you gambling wise, aside from maybe coming in third place to Clay in season 2? Because I asked you,
the season never happened. That season never happened. It was stricken from the records. I was taking shots, and
you're the only one who welcomed COVID at that time. It's very sad, but you're rooting against the country. Yeah.
I was the one that was on air doing shows from home with COVID.
That's
getting
true.
Notes from our executive team. Todd needs to show a little bit more energy when he's doing these hits. Talking about NFL division.
That was the bad COVID too. Yeah,
exactly. That was the OG strand.
Well, I always ask you, how much do you have on this? You're like, oh, it's a pretty big play for me, about 6 units. I'm like, oh, shut up with your units. Tell me how much. Tell me what was rock bottom for you. It could have been probably you're smarter about this stuff now, although it seems like you've been smart about it for a while. But there must have been some time where you were like ducking out of the back room of Caesars, figuring out where you're going to get your next meal.
No, the rock bottom for me was probably from dollars that I had invested in a game to a percentage of my bankroll was the Alamo Bowl. God, I don't even know how many years ago at this point, between TCU and Oregon. So I was actually down there for the game in San Antonio, and I'd been walking around trying to get myself a coffee first thing in the morning. And I started to hear some buzzing in our hotel that TCU's starting quarterback at the time, Trevon Boykin, had gotten himself into a altercation on the Riverwalk and wasn't going to be available for the game. So of course, the first thing I did, I could care less about what's actually had happened, who was hurt, what this meant in the big picture. It was, all right, has this number moved? Has that information been made public? So it hadn't. So I decided that I was going to run and I was going to bet Oregon at a pick'em and then figure out what to do with it, a little bit later on. 90 minutes or so after that, I find out that Boykin is indeed going to be suspended with a couple other TCU players. Number balloons out to 7.
Wow.
And at that time, I mean, what I have 4,000 on the game was, a massive bet for me that I had laid out, when I was working probably off a, $30,000 bankroll.
Mm-hmm.
So the number moves out, and the smart, prudent thing to do would have been to come back over the top and play the middle. But, I'm thinking, hey, look, I don't see it happening. I know where TCU's quarterback is for me on the depth chart. Well, I go to the game at the Alamo Bowl, and Oregon builds, I want to say it was a 35-0 lead.
Yeah, I remember this game. Was this like a Friday night?
In the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. With about 3 minutes to go in the first half, Vernon Adams gets absolutely crushed. And TCU scores before the half. He gets ruled out for the game. But because the Alamo is the biggest piece of shit as far as stadiums were concerned back then, had no access to a cell phone reception, couldn't call any of my guys to try and get off, some of the bet and look to play what then would have been an absolutely massive middle.
Monster.
And as luck would have it, Harry, that lead didn't quite last nearly as long as I would have thought. I was in attendance with, Payne Insider at the game, and he saw me slump down in that seat more and more with each passing Horned Frogs touchdown. Ultimately, TCU wins and covers in overtime. I'm rooting like hell for Oregon to go for 2 in one of the overtimes. And then, of course, because the gambling gods love to laugh at everyone's misery, it's pissing freezing rain for the 1.5 mile walk that I have to make back to the hotel. That insult to injury. So yeah, that was probably the biggest rock bottom gambling moment for me. And it just taught me a little bit more about bankroll management. But honestly, Sal, it pales in comparison to the Rams and Saints NFC Championship. So I'll never be able to hold the torch to that story.
Bad too. That was a big. Well, I had Clay involved in that. So how the hell am I going to? How are we both?
That's a good point. That was a perpetual black cloud hanging over your head.
Yeah, exactly. Harry, go ahead. I know you have a question for Todd. He has to get going soon. So go ahead. What do you got?
Todd, a little football here.
Yeah, I got fireworks to light off here. It's the holiday. You guys are taking my time away on 4th of July.
You're a Vegas guy. I used to be a Vegas guy until like Sal likes to tell people that I got kicked out of town. But I heard
the same things, Harry. I've talked to my people. The Red Rock Casino, they corroborate that story. They said you're persona non grata. You're 86th from all Stations casinos.
That's right.
I'm not afraid to say it. Station Casino sucks. I'm saying it straight up. They're the worst. Such phonies. Anyways, Raiders.
He's been thrown out of much more reputable casinos. So go ahead. Yeah.
The worst. Anyways, 10 wins last year. Tasted the playoffs. They've got Devontae Adams now and a new coach in Josh McDaniels. Picked up Chandler Jones, who had 19.5 sacks a couple of years back for the Cardinals. At 7-1 for the division. Is that incredible for you, for a guy who loves value? Is that incredible value?
This is the Raiders.
The Giants are 6-1. The Raiders, considering the Giants are 6-1 to win the East, and they barely could put up a touchdown last season. The Raiders at 7-1. Is that incredible value?
I hate to say this. I like this too. I don't understand it.
Well, first things first, talking about Station Casinos, there's now officially a target on Harry's back from the Fertitta family. So Harry, when you come to Vegas, make sure you're looking over your right shoulder at all times. But I did speak to the people at Arizona Charlie's. They said you were the best. They said you were the best. They said you were the best employee they ever had that manned the buffet. So kudos for that. At least you'll always have one place to come back to.
There you go.
Now, as far as the Raiders,
overrated.
As far as the Raiders are concerned, I worry about this roster. I think they were extremely fortunate down the stretch last year. I mean, you look at an offense that struggled to move the ball consistently. Sure, Devontae Adams gives them a true number one that they desperately lacked for extended stretches last year. But it almost felt like they lived a charmed existence. I mean, Rick Bisaccia was getting the most out of them. I wrote them off for dead before that Thanksgiving day when they embarrassed the Dallas Cowboys, which seemed to kind of rejuvenate their season.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I just look at the roster and I think defensively, there are a lot more questions than they can answer. To your point, Harry, bringing Chandler Jones opposite Max Crosby, I really think will pay dividends, but the secondary still a major concern for me. And when I look at the Chargers improvements, I mean, if I'm talking about value in the AFC West, I won't write the Chiefs off for dead, and I'm not ready to eulogize them yet in this season. But I think the Chargers at any price better than 2-1 make an awful lot of sense if you believe that Justin Herbert's going to continue to take strides forward. And this defense that was absolutely porous, especially against the run, will get better with some of the key offseason acquisitions.
I'm excited. I'm excited for football. You just got me back. This happens like once a day. I'll read something, I'll hear something. Now I know we're like 80 days away or whatever, but I'm getting there. And by the way, I get mad when I see you promoting Bet the Board. We're going 5 power conferences and all 8 NFL divisions with Payne Insider. I'm like, oh Jesus. Well, we have so much work to do, Harry. These guys are all over. This is like someone saying they're done with their Christmas shopping the week before Thanksgiving. I'm like, son of a bitch. How do you do it? This is supposed to be the slow time. You're supposed to be vacationing, and you're in your house and you're in your pool studying in Henderson.
Yeah, the incredible part is the offseason gets shorter and shorter. I mean, we were doing previews earlier. I mean, we talked about it. I mean, I think we gave our ACC preview went live in the middle of June, where we didn't start doing previews previously until July. And honestly, I still feel late to the game because college football win totals are up everywhere. I don't bet into them nearly as aggressively as I should, with a willingness to tie up money for 6+ months. But the days of us having a true offseason as sports bettors, I mean, I long for those, Sally. When you used to be able to go radio silent after the All-Star break, take a couple weeks before football cranked up in earnest in August. I mean, it just doesn't exist now.
Can't do it.
I try and take a little bit of time, in April and May, where it's mainly just the NHL playoffs going on. Just had an 11-day trip back to the East Coast, which was nice. But yeah, it's full football, full steam ahead right now. And hopefully we can give you a couple of NASCAR sweats to keep you engaged on Sundays until we talk about toe meat and leather.
Yes, I love it.
I'm in on the NASCAR, Todd.
Well, you know what? I'm going to start watching too because I get bored Sunday afternoons. I'm like, there's nothing
There we
here.
go. Get on board, Sally.
Right.
Get on board.
It's always a screw job at the end for me. Hey, be honest, because I know you have to go. Who do you miss most?
Gassy Gagnon's got winners for you. There we go. Or hit the Gas Gagnon, whatever the hell he's calling himself these days.
I think he called it Gas Gagnon.
Gassy style, yeah.
Who do you miss most, Todd? Me, Clay, or Rachel? Be honest.
Oh, that's a no-brainer. I miss you the most because there was no better feeling than when I got to put the crown on Monday morning.
Oh, stop it.
And you look like I had murdered your entire family and you were so miserable. And Harry, I'll leave on this note. I never really believed how angry Sal got until Melissa would tell me at dinner. We sat down in Redondo Beach. It was Melissa, Sal, my fiance, who was then girlfriend, Nicole, and I. And Melissa goes, you have no idea how angry Sal used to get every week you beat him. And even though he got the best of me in season 3, that was all the validation I needed to know that I got my pound of flesh, especially in season 1.
The other side of that is and these NASCAR events, I would end up betting what you needed to win. So I'd have like $500.
By the way, I'm taking the mic with you and we'll continue to chat, but we're going to get ourselves set up on set. So you guys get to see the whole office right now. So
go ahead.
Wow,
there we go.
nice.
Oh, I do like this. I do like this. Yeah, I would bet this is nice.
A little behind the scenes. So
beautiful.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
No, I would bet what you needed to win on Fox Bet Live, and then I would lose. I would happily lose like $700 on the Harvick to come in top 3 or something.
Right. Just to put on that. Which Harry is a 99-cent. Harry, that's a little bit weird though, because Fox Bet Live only paid me $700 to do the entire season. So that's what was more bizarre about Sal's willingness just to win a competition that was supposed to be a little bizarre, quote unquote friendly.
All right, I'm letting you go because I'm getting dizzy here, and I know you have a lot of work to do. I appreciate it. Todd Fuhrman. Oh, check it out. Bet the Board. It's now affiliated with NASCAR. I don't know what took so long. Wow. God bless you, Fuhrman. So we do what we can. Thanks, guys, as always. I appreciate you having me on. Hopefully you took your Dramamine before that final 30 seconds dancing around the office. But everyone, enjoy the 4th of July. Harry, you with your new bride. Sal with all the family members that I like better than you. So have fun with the boys. Keep David under control as best you can. And we'll have to do this again, guys, before football. All right, pal. I'll see you. Take care, buddy.